The movie is more similar in every way to a comic book than the first one, including the fact that you should just really sit back, eat your popcorn, and have fun. And the story is going to be taking twists and turns here and there. And quite frankly, neither David nor I were worried about making this real, as everybody seems to be worried these days. We wanted to make it fun.
It's important to me, I think, from a kind of fan credibility level, that this film, or these films, this franchise, have an integrity to them that's true to the comic books. And one of the things that's a little different from Blade, from some of the other more well-known characters like Spider-Man or Captain America, is he always was a very dark character, so it's appropriate that these films be R-rated. And you can get away with a little more in these films than you could in Spider-Man or Captain America. But, you know, I think they're true to the comic book sensibility.
What we did very well was capture the tone of a comic book, and Guillermo's a total comic book geek. He's got a huge, I think, like a quote-unquote important collection of comic books. So he understands the tone very well. And in that sense, whether his style is slightly more Gothic or Baroque, darker, the tone, I think, is still going to be quite consistent.
Well, Guillermo was weaned on comic books, as was I. I was a huge comic book collector when I was a kid. I have letters published in Captain America comics and some DC comics. And I remember when I was 10 or 11 years old, riding my bike out to a drugstore and buying Tomb of Dracula comics, in which Blade was a character. So it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy that here I am writing these Blade movies.
The main thing with a comic book movie is to be done intelligently by someone that really knows the genre as a literary genre. I think that so often you hear someone is adapting a comic book movie and they think they're adapting a movie for retards. And in reality, it's an extremely sophisticated, extremely difficult, incredibly complex language that comic books have. And it's, for me, a form of art. There are comic books that stand right next to a Thomas Cole painting as a masterpieces, or the Mona Lisa, or anything you want. For me, there are comic books that are that great as a humanity-created piece of expression. And I approach that with enormous respect and discipline and try to translate that to the screen. You know, there are different types of comic books as there are different types of movie. And I wanted this to be the comic books that I read as a young guy that made me excited and action-packed, and that had the kind of exaggerated language that Jack Kirby, for example, would have. And I wanted to give the movie that kind of exaggerated language. You know, Ron Perlman with the two guns pointing to each side in an almost superhero pose, with the Reapers running on the walls, or stuff like the explosions, which are going to be treated to be like a Jack Kirby explosion in a comic book. The ultimate effect of that is going to even have the trademark Jack Kirby style explosion power dots. That, if you know the comic book style, it's very evident. We also push certain sounds beyond the reality. And I say this very often in the mixing stage. I say, they are mixing things like real, like a real movie, like a movie that reflects reality, and I tell them it's a comic book. So please make this sound like a comic book door, meaning crack, you know, where you read the sound. Bang. Bang in a comic book is bang. In reality, it's you know, it's not good. The style of dialogue there is it has a certain awkwardness that makes it uniquely comic book, like must reach the lever or I will die, you know, or like limb is broken in two, must get up, you know, like things that are completely, no one talks like that or even thinks like that. But Goyer now and then hits it just perfect in the movie. You know, certain lines just have that same comic book feeling.
You have been our most feared enemy. But now there's something else loose on the streets.
You want to catch the hunter. You start with the prey.
Wesley has an uncanny thing. And it's, I don't know, it's completely part of his nature. I know he doesn't try to do that, or at least I don't think he does, but every single time he stops in a movement and where he starts from a movement are perfect comic book poses. Perfect. Like you can freeze frame that and it's a comic book frame. I think that vampirism as a phenomenon, or the vampire as a symbol, is absolutely, open to interpretation in many, many ways. Vampirism is an addiction. It can be interpreted as an erotic proclivity, can be interpreted as a religious analogy. It can be, it lends itself to play with it. You can make it political, you can make it social, sexual, anything. When you read about vampirism all over the world, you realize that every culture has interpreted the vampire in a certain way. Malaysian vampires, for example, detach from the body and use their intestines to wrap around the victim and so forth. Chinese vampires are different. They can turn into foxes, into cats, so on and so forth. Mexican vampires look like chihuahuas in a way. They are completely hairless, and they do not have pointed teeth. And you can continue.
Vampires do have a universal appeal because they're sexy. They're monsters, but they're still human monsters. They look human, and they effectively live forever.
Vampires are very cool and very sexy in a way. It's something like they're evil, but you're drawn to them because, like with Dracula, he's a babe magnet, So I think that people just they think it's exciting. It's a very sexual thing or erotic thing with vampires and all the biting and all that kind of thing.
I think any child, when you tell him a vampire story, will start opening his eyes and start, fantasizing about it. It's so deeply engraved in our culture, in our, fantasies, in our fears and dreams, sucking out blood, living out of flesh, the thirst. And it's such a, for me, it's such a sexual thing still, because it's sensual and it's carnal.
The fascination of young people with vampires is because that's the only age where you can think you're going to live forever. And when you feel like that, and you throw absolutely every caution to the wind, you truly are immortal for a little bit. And I think that is what makes it, both vampirism and youth, very fragile and very beautiful.
Truth is, I think a lot of people would want to be vampires. You don't really age. If you get hurt, you regenerate. You're stronger than humans. You're faster than humans. The sex is probably better than human sex. So why not be a vampire? It's kind of a sexy proposition.
Goyer's on crack. No, I don't think everybody. I think that a lot of people, especially when you're young, and when you're really old, I think that in the middle you're too busy paying the bills. Or trying to get out of kindergarten with your eyes intact. I think that when you're young, you dream of preserving that youth and that freedom. And when you're really old, you long for that youth that you lost. But I think that the secret desire to live eternally it's a very romantic notion of vampirism.
I was tired of the Anne Rice vampire sensibility. Not that she hasn't made a huge contribution to the genre, but I just think that kind of thing has dominated vampire films for so long that we wanted to take it in a different direction.
It's almost Byronian. It's very much like the Byronian vampire comes to fruit in Anne Rice's novels. It's the romantic hero per excellence. In Kronos, it was more about making a little tale about Catholic guilt, addiction, religious catharsis, and so forth, and about a guy that finds out that he is alive only after he dies, and how worthy his life really was, and how you really reach immortality when you give up everything. A very Catholic view. And with us, we try to deal with them in other terms. They are, as I said, they can be the drug dealers of that universe. Or they can be, in this case, the dirty dozen of the universe. But you can deal with them in terms that are more pulpish and more comic. Anne Rice's sensibility is more high-reaching and more literary and more, the aspirations are more Byronian. We're just pulp. You know, we're just pure pulp, and I like it. I love the idea of taking something pulp and then elaborating it visually with a lot of care. You know, I think that the product that comes out is really a very nice confection. I hope one day to do a movie about vampires that have been alive for so long that they don't really care about anything anymore. Because I really think that after 500 years, you would get a little jaded.